times. And it's very difficult to really see that even in those dark moments of your life, there is actually light. Or in the dark moment that you are basically going through as a person, there is actually something that is happening to you that is actually to your added advantage. But I think that the way we are wired as human beings is that we fail to acknowledge the other side of what we are experiencing, especially if what we are going through is not to our benefit. So if we bring this then in the context of relationships and marriage, it's also, we can put in the same category that to the relationship itself, it's one relationship, it's one marriage. There will always be aspects to the relationship or to your partner that you are not going to basically like. But I think if we are intentional enough and become more aware, we can actually say that even those aspects to your partner that you don't like, they are there to the benefit of your life. They are there to the benefit of the relationship. So this is why we're trying to say that as we grow and we become intentional in trying to build our own relationships then, is to try and not destroy one another because there are aspects to our partner that we don't like and we want to change them so that they are more aligned to who we are. What we are doing in the end then is that we are actually destroying a part of ourselves. Are we together? Because remember what I said, that it's a part that has two sides, but it's one part. So if I go on to try and demean the difference, the uniqueness of my wife, what I'm actually doing is that I'm destroying that which was meant to benefit me, that which was also meant to benefit the relationship, because that's how basically it works in life. So to every negative, there is always a positive. And to every positive, there is also a negative. But they work together to basically produce something that is beneficial to all of us, especially those of us who are in the relationship. And we can take the same principle, even in the things that you might be going through in this season. It's not all darkness. Even in darkness, there is still light. Here is what Stephen Covey says. He says, strength lies in difference, not in similarities, basically. Because it's very easy for us to think that we are strong if we are similar. But true strength basically lies in the fact that we ought to be different, and our differences really they are not to our disadvantage. They are basically to our advantage. So this teaching, ladies and gentlemen, isn't about trying to have a perfect relationship or finding a perfect partner. To those of you who are still looking, that doesn't exist. There is nothing like a perfect partner. There is nothing like a perfect relationship, because we are both different and our experiences are both different, and that makes it imperfect. But even in those imperfections, according to God's design, is that something beautiful can still emerge. And we always say that I think that much of our issues in relationship is our resistance to that change, to that transformation, to that acknowledgement of basically our difference. So all of these are huge differences. You can be born from the same house, even the same family, but you can be totally different individuals. But think about coming from even a different tribe, a different background, and trying to kind of come together to form a relationship. That is a huge difference. And it's very important for us to say that instead of trying to discard, demean, and fight over our difference, we want to be able to look at those differences with just a different perspective to say, how can we use our differences as a way and a source of strength for our relationship. And how can we grow basically from our differences? So our differences are not there to disadvantage us. They are not there to break us. They're not there to destroy us. They are there to make us better. They are there to provide a platform and a source for basically our strength. So this means, ladies and gentlemen, that when it comes to our difference, it means that when we are coming into a relationship, we don't leave our personality, our background, and even our gender difference aside. All of these things represents our perspective. So I come into this relationship with my background. That background has its own perspective, similar to my wife as well. The fact that she's a woman, the fact that I'm a man, that in itself comes with a different perspective. The fact that our personalities are different, that in itself comes with perspective. But I think that when we come into our relationship, there is a tendency to disregard somebody's personality, a tendency to disregard somebody's background, a tendency to disregard even somebody's inclination, just basically that somebody is a woman and somebody is a man. All of this perspective then are important because they are there for a reason. So then the core thing as we look at this perspective is that the position is basically to say that each and every person's perspective is always right. There is no wrong perspective. So your husband's perspective, and if you don't like it, it's a right perspective, because if it wasn't right, he would have not raised it. He would have not defended his position. Your perspective as a wife as well on the things that you differ and you're trying to bring a strong, put on the table is also right, because if it wasn't right, those could have not been the major issue of conflict. But the challenge is that we think that because we perceive that our perspectives are right, then we go on to emphasize that my wife and my husband's perspective is wrong. So we go on to try and superimpose our perspective. So we superimpose our perspective that is sponsored by our personality. We superimpose our perspective that is based on our background. This is how we cut vegetables. Because somebody saw how they cut, they used to cut vegetables. Or this is how we squeeze a toothpaste. Because historically and the background-wise, that has been. But there's no right way to actually squeeze a toothpaste or to cut vegetables. I'm just raising simple differences. Or some argue about leaving the toilet cover open or closed. Some families, they open the toilet cover so that it can breathe. Some family, they close the toilet covers because they can contain the smell inside. These are things that when you come into the context of the relationship, you will think that your background is the best and your partner's background is the worst. How can you leave the toilet open? I mean, what kind of people are you? It's a difference, right? But actually what you need to do is to acknowledge that my partner and I are different, and our perspective are not wrong. But the most critical and the most important point then is to find what is it that is in the best interest of the marriage or the relationship. Are you seeing the point? So you both find and establish that you are not wrong in your perspective. But if you don't then hold on to that position, then the question that should follow is to say, okay, how can we then find that which is right for this relationship? And I think that's where we are going this afternoon. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. I find it very interesting that we had some responses, and mostly from the ladies. So it's good to know that you're present and that you're engaging in this discussion. And really, I'm just going to talk briefly about mastering differences in background, in personality, as well as in our gender and communication styles. And it's really interesting to pay attention to what Pastor's just said around how innately we all think we are right? My way must be right. I mean, it was quite interesting to get married and to have to adjust and thinking, why doesn't this man know we squeeze the toothpaste from the bottom? You know, things like that. But yeah, and it's the truth is that we all come into relationships and marriage with our own rule books, you know, and these rule books are set because of how we were raised. They're set because of, you know, so family upbringing, culture, education, you know, sometimes your socioeconomic standing, and that plays a role. So we cannot belittle what, where, and how we have been raised has impacted our outlook on relationships. And what I always say is people need to learn to delve into intentional dialogue as you start dating or as you're courting, as you are in marriage. Let's have intentional conversations. So for instance, when looking at differences in the background, in how you've been raised, I think people need to get together and ask, what was normal in your family when you were growing up? You know, because some families are intentional around dinner should be at the dinner table. Not some of you are watching TV, some of you at the dinner table. In some families, there are expectations around children in this household will speak up and engage in debate or participate in discussions. You know, so you find that one may come from a family where debate is encouraged or speaking up is encouraged, whereas somebody may come from a background where the minute they heard a heightened voice tone, they suspected somebody's angry. Now imagine you are together, you've come together, one's coming from that home or family background where raising your voice was not encouraged, and your partner's raising their voice was highly encouraged. Already you're going to potentially run into conflict because of just that simple example around how you were raised around a dinner table. Even things like, you know, depending on if you grew up at the dinner table, elbows off the table or elbows not on the table, all those begin to bring challenges. And the truth is, each one of us will rightfully think that they are right. And so you find that what's happening is we're clashing. We're consistently clashing. So that's something to definitely look at. But what we want to try and bring to the fore today is how do we take advantage of differences, or how do we master those differences in background, and how do we then bring them together as we come together in relating or in marriage. So the first aspect really is how do you use whatever your differences may be, and I want you to personally reflect on your current differences. We've just given a few examples right now, right? So think on them as we go through this, right? The first is, how do we now bring those differences, the debater versus the quiet person? How do we bring them together, you know? And the truth is, in having intentional dialogue and conversations, and the reason I keep saying having intentional dialogue and conversations is life gets busy. Life gets busy, we get married, year 1, year 2, babies are born, babies are now going to school, you're working, and sometimes we tend to think in the busyness of life we are actually relating, when what you find is you're just managing each other's schedules around what is critical. And so there's not enough time invested in let's dialogue. And that's what's important, is that you must have those dialogues so that you can unpack some of these differences. And so the first point is that we would encourage that you become cultural anthropologists, right? We encourage that you become cultural anthropologists. So have the discussions around how you grew up, what you did, what traditions came out of your family background, so that you begin to understand why your husband or why your wife engages the way they do. So ask questions, literally, like, in your family, how was money discussed? Was money discussed? Because that begins to shape how you decide how will money be discussed in this family. What did a successful weekend look like? Some families, was prioritizing rest critical, or was it not? And those are differences that we can sometimes want to sweep under the carpet, but they are important. Because if I was raised to enjoy the weekend in a certain way, and my husband may have not been raised, and I choose to keep quiet out of submission, I might actually end up building all these emotions and frustrations that one day will blow out, and he won't even understand where that came from. When all we could have done is actually invest time in ensuring that we actually have the conversations and ask the questions. So it's a call to ask where you've identified what may even potentially be irritating you in your relationships. Ask the questions around that, so that you can begin to understand where it comes from and why it's being done in the manner it is. Secondly, create a new shared culture. So you've now understood how money was discussed, how weekends or holidays were spent. What are you going to now create as your new defined culture? And this is really powerful, because it's an opportunity to bring two people's pasts and histories together. But you're not bound to what you used to do as you were being raised. You're not bound to that. You can definitely carve out what is unique for you and what works for you as a couple, in terms of defining what traditions will represent us as the Namwanzas, for instance. I think I've shared this before, in our first year of marriage, I naturally just expected we're going to my parents for Christmas. Didn't consider anything else. It was just an expectation. Until my husband said, no, we're going to the Sahes for Christmas. I'm like, oh, but those are your friends. They're not even family, But we had to talk about it. It was time to redefine what is going to be what we do as the Namwanzas versus what Kuzi's used to under Hasichula household. So those conversations become critical, and we want to just encourage that you have them. So perhaps discuss, do we blend holidays? How do we create our own unique celebrations around different traditions? How do we talk about how we're going to handle money in this family? When will we start engaging the children around money? Because again, if we're talking about mastering our backgrounds and already understanding that we all come with a certain rule book that's defined by how we were raised, it means already in our setting, you're already influencing how Uyi, for instance, the Malokos, is going to grow up and understand and engage around what he's witnessing in your household. So it becomes critical that we are intentional around that. But there is an advantage to be gained in coming together, because the truth is, by my embracing and asking and being inquisitive about my husband's background and vice versa, it allowed us to expand our worldview. It allowed us, to both expand the worldview but also enrich it. So that's why, you want to have those intentional discussions so that you can gain access to a whole new way of doing things, of thinking, of perspectives. And I believe that's what keeps our relationships and our marriages colorful and not boring, because there's consideration of the other end and the other perspective. Secondly is, mastering differences in personality. Now, I think I'm an extrovert. No, yes, I think I'm an extrovert. You're the introvert. So when we come together, we do come together, as two different people. And sometimes that comes with there's a certain way as an extrovert I will behave. As an introvert, you will behave. If you're a type A personality or someone who plans, there's a certain expectation you have when you come into a relationship versus somebody who's spontaneous. Now imagine a type A personality likes to plan, schedule everything, and then they marry somebody who's spontaneous. Just picture that situation and what's going to happen. The truth is, the planner tends to get irritated by the person who's spontaneous, right? You think, oh, look at this one. Their lack of planning is going to get us in trouble. The spontaneous person equally thinks, oh, look at this rigid, boring planner. Perspective. So the two of you have come together, and the truth is your strengths, because the planning is a strength. Spontaneity, for those of us who are planners, is a strength as well. So when two people come together like that, you want to ask God to give you the grace to not be irritated, but to embrace your partner's strength, to recognize that they're complementing an aspect to you or of you that you may be weak in. So the truth is, as we come together and you recognize that, you want to address it. Don't ignore it. Don't sweep it under the carpet. Have a discussion about it. Because the truth is, if in the background conversation, you've now redefined how, the Malocos, you are in front of me. You've now defined how you as the Malocos are going to, tackle certain celebrations or traditions or going on holiday, actually. What you want to do is you want to allow the planner to obviously plan the flights, and the itinerary, because we want to give Caro that opportunity to have some level of control, right? But you want Francis to decide, while you're on holiday, which restaurants, where we're going, so that it keeps it fresh and colorful and not completely boring, because Caro said at 8 o'clock on Tuesday, this is where we're going, this is what we're doing for this duration. You want to bring those strengths together and allow them to complement what you are building as a unit. So how that works to your advantage really is that you're allowing a reframing of your personality differences to complement you both in that relationship. So what you want to do is you want to focus on appreciating what each person brings to the table and not perceive them as weaknesses, but rather remembering that they are strength. So stop trying to change the spontaneous person to becoming a planner, or stop trying to change the planner to become spontaneous, because you both have strengths. The planner provides stability and foresight. You as a spontaneous partner brings joy and flexibility. And therefore that marriage, that relationship can be colorful. Or if we look at the logical partner, where we are dating or we are married to somebody logical, they help us analyze the problem. And then if the other partner is overly emotional, that also is worth celebrating, because they help us come to a place of valuing the emotions in that relationship. So we can't give in to our innate desire to, overlook or belittle the other person's personality. The truth is, as you master your personality differences as well, it allows you, to divide and conquer, and not necessarily to now be at loggerheads. So let each person take the lead in the areas they are strong at. Yeah? Like we've mentioned, we let Caro plan the holiday itinerary, and then Francis can look for where we go to have food and so forth. And the truth is that by doing so, you're becoming a more capable team. Amen. Even the Bible says, that where there's unity, God commands a blessing. So combining different traits makes the couple stronger, makes them more capable. Together, you cover more ground. Amen. And you're better prepared. I always think, when there's more than one perspective, you're better prepared to plan around almost anything. It's always so comforting for me if I've had a long, tired day from the office and I come home and I share. It's always been so settling to hear my husband's perspective, because I would have come vexed, saying ABC about how my day went and how this didn't quite work out. The strategy is just not unfolding the way it should. And then he gives his perspective and I'm able to settle, to calm down. And that's just a work example, but there are many different aspects to our lives. And really, our partners are there, to help make navigating life that much easier, that much better. And so it becomes quite important to be intentional, to just master our personalities and allow us to then build on that unit and be a more capable team. The third is, mastering differences in the fact that we are different genders and that we communicate differently. And really the basis is, if we talk about even just love languages, right? I know we live in times where there are generalizations, and society has almost defined certain norms around how men behave, around how women behave, and sometimes we tend to adopt that, but I think the key is always to understand what are the underlying needs in how we are engaging and communicating with one another as a man and as a woman. We've established that there are different love languages. So as you come together, you learn that some of you, you prefer words of affirmation, and that's how you know that you're loved by your partner. Some of us, acts of service. Others, it's physical touch, quality time. My favorite, receiving gifts. So you have these different love languages, but the truth is we also speak quite differently and have different goals in conversing. So sometimes, I may come home and, like I said, vexed, and I want to share what's going on or share a problem with my husband. And truly, a lot of the time as women, the intention is you just want to be heard. You just want to be empathized with, right? And here comes your husband or your man, and already they are offering solutions. They just want to fix the problem, fix it, yeah? And a lot of the times that can be, seen as, okay, he just dismissed how I'm feeling. Then he now feels confused because he's feeling unappreciated because he offered a solution to your problem, but you're now moody because he didn't quite empathize the way you wanted him to empathize with you. But again, the question is, how do we use these differences in gender, in communication styles, to our advantage? And the first is, pay attention and learn your partner's native language. Explore what they're like. The truth is, in appreciating the intention, in recognizing that there will be differences between our genders and how we communicate, acknowledging that allows us to actually build deeper intimacy, and allows us to come together in ensuring that we can effectively solve problems together. You see, when we learn to communicate in a way that your partner truly understands, trust is built. So even in the times where they may slip up, and we've spoken about appreciate the intention, it's from a place of love, and that it wasn't intentional that they just dismiss you. So together you become an effective team, and you want to be able to listen, to validate the emotions or the feelings, and you want to be able to put your heads together around whatever it is that's being discussed, so that together you can, try and solve the problem at hand. Yeah.
You guys are quiet. Isn't that great? Isn't that great? Thank you. Can I have some water? Brother Francis, do we still have some time? Can we talk?
Yes, you've got about 10 minutes.
We have 10 minutes. Okay.
Let's go with 8.
8 minutes. Okay. All right. All right, I think maybe here is, I'm sure she has already given even the solutions to our difference. And I think my mind is going back to the dismissive disposition that we all come with in the relationship when we establish that our partner is not like us. Then we think that who they are isn't great and who we are is the greatest. And I think that if we are going to truly build what God wants us to build, that dismissiveness, even when you are different, one came from a rich family, one came from a poor family, even in that extreme, there is still something that you can learn from the one who came from a rich family. You can't just say, no, you guys are too materialistic. And then you guys, whatever name you can call somebody who came from a poor background. But the idea is that always have this reverence towards your partner and who they are. Don't come with the idea and the mentality that your background is the best, how you are raised is the best, your personality is the best, and they are the one that needs to be fixed. If you go into the marriage and into a relationship with that mentality, you are going to actually end up destroying your partner, but also you're going in the end up destroying yourself, and ultimately you are not going to have the relationship that God would have wanted you to basically have. So respect one another, love one another, and I think in the previous session we spoke about acceptance. Accept your partner as they are before even wanting to fix them. And if you can't accept the person as they are and you are in the dating phase, maybe you have an opportunity to leave them alone. Because once you get into the space of marriage, without accepting that person, they will feel that there's something that you don't appreciate about them. And you are in this marriage to fix them, and you are only going to be happy, excited about life the day that person is going to be fixed. And that is going to create resentments. So how do we go about that quickly? Pursue understanding as an act of love. Be curious to understand and seek to understand your partner. I think Stephen Covey will still say that seek to understand before you understood. You are understood in simple terms. But our selfish nature is that understand me first. Understand my viewpoint. Understand where I'm coming from. Understand how I was raised. Understand how I'm feeling. But the idea is that the way it's going to work is that we seek to understand before we are understood. That way, then you keep on learning how your partner respond, react, and what actually makes them behave a certain way. And I think when you gain more insight into your partner's life, background, personality, even the things that used to bother you that much tend to bother you less. And even where you know that they need to change and improve, not just for the sake of the marriage, but for their sake, there is a lot of grace that is extended, because you understand that if he knew better, or if she knew better, she could have not acted or behaved that way. So there's a lot of more grace when we seek to understand our partner. But I think the proclivity of wanting to be understood makes us forget that when we take that position, we are actually creating more problems for ourselves in the relationship. Proverbs chapter 18 verse 13 says, to answer before listening, that is folly and shame. In simple terms, get the full story before you judge. I think that all of us don't have the natural, I would call it, we don't have the patience that we need to understand our partner, but yet we want them to have the patience to understand us, to meet our needs. But we don't have time for them. We want them to get their acts right. We want them to be fixed. And in that, it also shows in our communication and how we bring about certain things, because there's that lack of humility to say, I want to understand my wife and I want to understand my husband. And I want also to raise this point, is to say that life change and seasons change. You can think that you have understood your wife now and you have understood your husband right now, and a major event happens in life that brings about a dimension, aspect to them that you never knew was there. And even in that, you have to be flexible to say, okay, now this is before me. I never saw that my husband can actually get this upset. I didn't know. Oh, okay, so let me now, adjust and seek to understand where this is all coming from. So we can't just say we are all changing. Even education changes us, ladies and gentlemen. If you started life and your wife had a certificate, I can guarantee you that the day she does a master's and a PhD, she's not going to be the same. That is the truth. Because there are different things that changes us, apart from our background, personalities, but even life events. But leave room to seek to understand your partner. Your partner is the best education you can ever have. The other thing is that appreciation practice. I think that this, I've said it over and over, is that we truly take for granted. We take each other for granted. We can easily get complacency. We can easily settle. And we begin to see that there's no value in our partner. There's nothing they bring to the table that adds value. So there is a lot of ingratitude. And all we want to do is that to fix them, to make them change, to make them understand and get our viewpoints. Without appreciation, ladies and gentlemen, even if you have a good woman, even if you have a good man, they will never live up to your expectation. I found that, and I think it's proven through psychology, that appreciation and gratitude is the greatest motivator. If you want your partner to even change in some aspects, don't let them feel that they need a lot of things to change about them. Let them have their heart filled that you value them and you appreciate them a lot. And from that point of view, when you bring something that needs to be adjusted, needs to be changed, it's going to be well received. So in order for us to master our differences, ladies and gentlemen, a culture of appreciation must actually take root. If your partner buys you something, even if she buys it every day or she buys it every day, don't take it for granted. And only remember the day they haven't bought. But when they've been doing the things, there's never been appreciation. But when somebody hasn't bought it, it matters and the negativity grows. But we have to be individuals that have a culture of appreciation. Appreciate your partner's the difference. Appreciate your partner's background. Appreciate, their personality. Appreciate who they are. Because the more you appreciate who they are, the more you are going to to receive more of the things that you think you are lacking that they're not giving you. So without appreciation, ladies and gentlemen, we are not going to actually master and work together within our differences. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 verse 18 says, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. The thing is, let me also read the other point. This includes giving thanks for your partner's difference. I think that all the things that we need our lives to be resolved or to be sorted and our marriages and the relationship to work are in the Word of God. And here we are being told, just give thanks. The situation may not be great, right? But you can find something within that situation to thank God for. Thank God for that you have a wife. Thank God for that you have a husband. We have married people through the journey of ministry. You are preaching, you are seeing them in the church, and you get home and you receive a call and you are told John is no more. But I saw John in the crowd. What happened? No, he was bumped by a car. But now think about the spouse. Maybe that day they had a fight, or that week they've been fighting, and the John that person has been fighting is no more. But I think that the attitude of not giving thanks is and being appreciative enough for one another actually multiplies some of the issues that we tend to have in the relationship. The last one, Brother Francis. I'm an introvert. Find the third way in your differences. Don't impose your way. Even if your background gave you opportunities that were greater than the background of your partner, even if your personality is a refined one, don't impose it. Even if you being a man or a woman comes with certain privileges, don't impose those differences so that that relationship become one-sided. It becomes how you want it to be. seek to find the third way that is going to work for you as a couple. Bring your background of exposure and bring your background of non-exposure and integrate and find the third way that is going to work for you. The last is the scripture here. We can actually read Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 9 to 10 says, two are better than one. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. This is basically in all our differences, ladies and gentlemen. God brings us together so that we can be better, not that we can fight each other and become bitter because our partner is different. There is a way and there is a reason why God brings us together, so that it's one of the way that God builds our lives. I'm a better man because I've met somebody who's different from me. And it was God's will, because the pastors maybe were preaching that I can change, but the word never entered. So God sent somebody in my life, and that partner has helped me to become a more sanctified child of God. Is that making sense? Brother Francis?